The world evolves at an increasingly quick rate thanks to the advancement of technology. Cities get larger, forests get smaller, and clues of the past slowly disappear. Well, in today's video, we explore 15 unbelievable locations that have been frozen in time, some even thousands of years. Stick around to the very end. You will feel like you've just stepped out of a time machine. 15. Pompeii. The ancient city of Pompeii was frozen in time almost 2,000 years ago, after Mount Vesuvius erupted and covered the entire town in molten ash. In fact, it wasn't just the buildings that were preserved, as the bodies of the dead decomposed and left voids behind in the ash that archaeologists later filled with plaster and excavated, resulting in the creepy death casts that have since made Pompeii famous. Ultimately, this flash froze the inhabitants in the positions they died in. The volcano also managed to preserve other things too, from advanced plumbing systems to colorful carved artwork. In fact, most of what is known about this period of time has been discovered from Pompeii, much of which rewrote the history books and our understanding of social and technological advancements. 14. Craco, Italy. The village of Craco dates back to 1060 AD, although monks and other settlers lived in the area even before then. During the Middle Ages, about 1,500 people lived in Craco at any given time. The huge town had 4 main plazas, multiple churches, and by the 1800s, was big enough to be split into 2 districts. Craco thrived for almost 1,000 years, but due to Italy's seismic activity, the slopes Craco were built on became unstable. In the mid-1900s, earthquakes and landslides damaged the town very badly, and in 1963, the last residents left for good. Today, the abandoned town and its immaculately preserved buildings are visited by thousands of tourists every year. 13. Pripyat, Ukraine. The ghost city of Pripyat in Ukraine is one of the eeriest abandoned places in the world. Pripyat was the 9th nuclear city in the Soviet Union, built to help run the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power plant, but has sat deserted ever since the infamous Chernobyl nuclear disaster that happened in 1986. In fact, the city's entire population was evacuated in just 4 hours, and because of the lingering radiation, nobody was allowed to return. That is, until 2010. However, when the radiation levels of both Chernobyl and Pripyat were deemed safe. With that being said, visitors are told not to touch objects that have been cordoned off and are not allowed to sit anywhere. 12. Wall of Tears, Hawaii. This next entry feels like it was frozen during a time when dinosaurs ruled supreme. The Wall of Tears, found in Hawaii, is part of a towering volcanic crater found on a mountain called Waiale'e. The sprawling wall of green is one of the wettest places on the planet due to its extensive rainfall, aptly named because it looks like streaming tears. The reason why this prehistoric location looks untouched is because traveling there is incredibly difficult. In fact, the only way to visit this location is by helicopter, which are not allowed to land. 11. Bodie, California. California's gold rush brought a huge number of settlers who hoped to strike gold and become richer than their wildest dreams. These settlers built shanty towns almost overnight and abandoned them almost as quickly when the gold range ran empty. Bodie in California is one of those abandoned ghost towns. Gold was first discovered in the area near Mono Lake back in 1875, which prompted the town to be built so it could house the many miners working the vein. In 1962, the former mine town became a National Historic Site and has remained looking the same ever since its last residents moved on in search of other treasures. If you lived back then, would you be willing to build a whole new settlement if it meant you had a chance of striking gold and becoming rich? Let us know in the comment section below. 10. Angkor Wat, Cambodia. Another ancient site that seems to have been forgotten by time is Angkor Wat in Cambodia, which is one of the largest temples ever built. It was constructed sometime between 1113 and 1150 AD as a Hindu temple and was later converted into a Buddhist temple. The city surrounding the temple, Angkor, is believed to have been the home to 1 million people at the height of its popularity. Angkor has been abandoned for hundreds of years now and is slowly being swallowed by the tentacle-like arms of the forest. Ironically, it is the thick vines that have braced the structure and kept it in the outstanding condition it has remained in. If you think this ancient city is beautiful, just wait until you see what places take the number 2 spot on this list. 9. Ross Island, India. Originally named after the esteemed marine surveyor Captain Daniel Ross, the Ross Island has now been renamed Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose Dweep by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in 2018. Although it is an incredibly small island, spanning just 5 kilometers, Ross Island has an extensive and interesting history. This island was first occupied in 1782, with a sanatorium being built soon after. In 1857, it was used again by the British, who used it as a military headquarters for 85 years. During that time, the British forced Indian prisoners to build many government offices, as well as other buildings to grow the settlement. In 1941, however, the buildings were abandoned because of a terrible earthquake. The ruins of the old buildings, including a church that looks completely out of place, have been hauntingly preserved by the thick vines and roots. Strangely, no one can sleep on the island at night, as a law strictly prohibits it. 8. The abandoned City Hall subway stop. Completed in 1904, City Hall Station was one of the first subway stops built on New York City's first line. It was built to impress New Yorkers with their new revolutionary method of transport. It featured Roman brick walls, brass chandeliers, and towering arches. Unfortunately, it closed in 1945 as it could no longer fit the growing number of subway riders. Standing on the platform today would be like stepping straight back into the Victorian era, during the golden era of New York's growth. 7. Land of Oz theme park. Based on the Wizard of Oz books first written in 1900 and turned into a film in 1939, Land of Oz became an abandoned theme park set in the lonely wilderness of the Beech Mountain of North Carolina. When it first opened in 1970, the Land of Oz had over 400,000 visitors. Unfortunately, shortly after it opened, interest quickly dropped and the yellow brick road began to turn green with moss. In 1975, a fire ravaged much of the remaining park, destroying the amphitheater, nearby shops, and restaurant. What further makes the park's history tragic is the fact that thieves broke into the park's museum and stole numerous original costumes from the film. Luckily, the park has now been purchased by a private owner and cleaned up by a resident caretaker. All year round, visitors are once again welcome to walk along the same yellow brick road as it looked 40 years ago. Are you enjoying the video so far? Why not hit the subscribe button so you never miss one of our future videos? You won't regret it. 6. St. George's Basilica, Czech Republic. The basilica was first built in the year 920. After serving the local towns for many years, a huge fire damaged it, forcing it to be rebuilt. Unfortunately, it continued to suffer from the fire damage and eventually fell into disrepair just after World War II. In 1968, the entire ceiling collapsed during a funeral, which forced the residents to abandon it forever as they believed it had been cursed. Despite the lack of ceiling and parts, the interior became frozen in time. In 2012, a student created a number of ghost statues to occupy the holy structure, which is quite fitting for the deserted church. 5. Petra, Jordan. The ancient city of Petra in Jordan has been uninhabited since the prehistoric times and is one of the most famous archaeological sites in the world. Made famous in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade movie, Petra was last inhabited 9,000 years ago before it was deserted. Although it was used as a trading point during the Nabatean Empire from 400 BC until around 106 AD. Because the rule of the area changed so frequently, as well as being hit by earthquakes, the city was slowly abandoned. By the look of the majestic and pristine buildings carved into the mountains, such as the famous monastery, it is hard to believe that you are looking at a structure that was made 2,000 years ago. Would you like to explore this ancient place? If the answer is yes, then click the thumbs up button. It is that part of the video where we take a look at the image shared with us by one of our subscribers that inspired this video. On first appearance, you may think that this is a place where a disaster forced all the drivers to hop out of their vehicles and never return. Well, in part that is the truth. Before we get into the history of Belgium's frozen traffic jam, make sure you subscribe to Forever Green. That way, you'll be able to reach out to us with an interesting or bizarre picture that could inspire our next video. 4. Belgian Forest Traffic Jam. This spooky apocalyptic setting may look like it came straight from the Walking Dead TV series, but it is actually one of the biggest car graveyards in the world, forming an eerie highway of cars that will never arrive at their destination. It is located in Belgium, and according to an urban legend, these vintage cars were left behind by US soldiers from World War II who couldn't ship them back home. Instead, they decided to hide them in a forest until they could come back and retrieve them, something that never happened. At one point, there were 4 car graveyards in the area with as many as 500 cars left behind. Unfortunately, most of the cars were stolen or removed, and due to the impact on the environment, the traffic jam was finally cleared in 2010. 3. Cold War Nuclear Missile Bunker. A Cold War nuclear bunker located in southern Arizona was left untouched for 60 years, quietly waiting to spring into action if the dreaded call for nuclear action was ever made. Fortunately, the missiles were never launched, and the bunker was locked away beneath the ground, looking exactly how it did in the 1960s. Even some of the computers remain largely intact. Now the site has been sold, although it is unsure what the new buyer will use the underground structure for. One thing that is for certain, being hidden underground in the middle of nowhere will definitely guarantee the type of privacy that has allowed the military structure to remain relatively untouched. If you could purchase this bunker, what would you do with it? Turn it into your own private fallout shelter, a private club, or maybe your own underground penthouse? Let us know in the comments. 2. Machu Picchu. Tucked away in the rocky countryside of Peru, Machu Picchu is believed to have been a royal estate or a religious site used by the Inca leaders. The Incas ruled Peru for many years until Spanish invaders arrived during the 16th century and wiped them out. For hundreds of years, the abandoned citadel's existence was kept a closely guarded secret. That is, until American archaeologist Hiram Bingham stumbled upon it back in 1911. Most historians agree that Machu Picchu was built at the height of the Inca Empire, which dominated most of western South America in the 15th and 16th centuries until the Spanish arrived. It was abandoned an estimated 100 years after its construction, which was around the time of the invasion. Because of this, the buildings were left impeccably preserved for 500 years. 1. HMS Terror. The wreck of HMS Terror is beyond a doubt the best preserved shipwreck from the 19th century. It is the cold and deep waters of Canada that have frozen it in time, as well as the thick layer of silt that has perfectly preserved artifacts such as maps, logs, and scientific instruments. The HMS Terror set sail from England in 1845 in search of a route across the Northwest Passage, but got stuck in thick sheets of sea ice. This forced the 129 crew members to abandon the ship in 1848, leaving the ice to shift and crush the vessel until it could no longer stay afloat by itself. Sadly, each of the men died one by one trying to walk across the Arctic to safety. The captain's cabin is the largest treasure trove of the wreck, with closed map cabinets, a tripod, and a pair of thermometers still set in place. And that concludes our video about 15 places where time has stopped still. Out of all the places you've heard about, which one would you like to visit the most? Let us know in the comments section below. If your appetite for fascinating content has not yet been satisfied, head over to one of our other videos to get your fill. Thanks for watching.